we as ambassadors and Stanford Center on Longevity has pretty much taken it for granted that the 100-year life is here to stay. So when you start working backwards and planning for it, having a retirement age at 58, 60, 65, the bigger question is, what are you going to do for 35 years, 40 years, or 30 years? Especially if you're over 60 or over 70, don't expect support from the government. Don't expect support from policy. Don't expect support from artificial intelligence. You are on your own, right? Now, right? Just get rid of it. There is nothing called retirement, right? Take time off if you need to. So think of this as a journey that you will be on till the day you die. Which is the segment that lives the longest? Do you know? Did I ask you that earlier?
No.
Politicians.
Right?
Why? Because they get active at 60, 70, 80. Right? The brain works. I mean, just think about it, right? Lawyers, doctors never retire. Most of them, at least. Right? Politicians. And most of them, in spite of deteriorating physical health, they stay sharp till the end.
Hello and welcome. You're watching the Longevity Shot. I'm Kavita Krishnan, and joining me today is Neeraj Sagar, who is the founder and CEO of Wisdom Circle, which is a post-retirement work marketplace. Now, before we get into the conversation, let me tell you this, that by the end of this, you will probably be rethinking the way you look at retirement. You probably also want to grab a pen and paper because you will have to note down some action points, and Neeraj is going to give you a lot of them and make you completely relook at the way that you have planned your retirement. So without further ado, let's welcome Neeraj Sagar. Neeraj, welcome to the show. And of course, it is great to have you here. But before we start talking to you about creating a longevity plan and preparing for work after 60, tell me this. Why is it that Wisdom Circle has a turtle or a tortoise for a mascot? I mean, you're talking work, you're talking progression, you're talking cutthroat competition. Why would you choose the slowest animal on the planet as your mascot?
No, thank you for even observing that, because for us, it all comes from the story of the hare and the tortoise. And while the world is solving for the hare, and I think our view was that tortoise lives long, is very intelligent, has a hard shell, so it's been knocked around quite a bit, and operates at its own pace. So I think there is something around, if you pick up a few of the words that I've been saying, right? So I've talked about pace, I've talked about knocked around and hard shell, I've talked about wisdom, and I've talked about not competing. So I think these are the words that actually lead up to what Wisdom Circle is about, and I'm happy to go into more details on that. But yes, that's where it comes from. In fact, it's a gender neutral turtle, as we call it.
Turtle, and that's what we should be looking for in the future in the workplace of the future. So Neeraj, I remember talking to you, and you told me that the workplace of the future is going to be very, very different from what we are seeing today. How is it different?
I think, so first of all, the number of generations that will be working together is something that we are already seeing. I mean, initially it was 2 generations, 3. We are now even talking 4 possible generations working together, which I think just changes the way we collaborate and assign roles and responsibilities. So to me, that's the first major change that's going to happen. I think the second is, depending upon which country you're in, your average age of the workforce is going to change. The third is, now we're talking artificial intelligence, right? We're talking about artificial intelligence helping speed up a percentage of your work that you do, which then changes the role that you play. So if you look at all the different elements or vectors that are coming into play, I think honestly, even we don't know what it's going to be like. All we know is it's going to be very different, and it will have to have, an ability to adapt to what people want to do as opposed to what organizations feel that they have to do.
Now, you call yourself a post-retirement work marketplace. Now, I was under the impression, and most of us are under the impression that work stops at retirement, which is when you hit age 60, you're done with work. What is a post-retirement work marketplace?
It's so the way we define it is so a couple of things. I'm going to take a couple of different angles to it. So one is from an individual's perspective. So when we started Wisdom Circle, our logic was, we interviewed a lot of people, and I think in my journey as a headhunter as well, um, retirement is what the world tells us that we have to stop working, and there are ages that are defined by country, by in some cases even by gender, believe it or not, saying you have to stop working at this age. That does not necessarily mean that people want to stop working, right? Now, I do agree that if you want to stop working, you're of course more than welcome to stop working. And that, by the way, we can do at any age. It doesn't have to be a retirement age, right? Um, so this notion, so for us, in fact, our hashtag is redefining retirement. So as a concept, I don't like the word. I think what we're talking about is scaling down the pace at which we operate. But now, why do we think there's a post-retirement marketplace? We think for two reasons. One, I think people, a lot of people we've spoken to want to continue contributing to the world, and in return, therefore, um, keeping their minds active. And again, scientifically, keeping minds active is what helps in delaying the onset of cognitive decline, or even for that matter, the rate of cognitive decline. Depression, we've talked, everyone talks about, but even, dementia, Alzheimer, etc. So there is a scientific basis for continuing applying your brain. Now, you can apply your brain in many things. Work is just one of them. Um, Now, and work is the easier one of them, believe it or not, because you don't have to learn anything new. If you know something and you can just reduce the number of hours and continue doing it, it's actually very, very beneficial to your cognitive health. Second, it also helps supplement your finances, because whatever said, I think the way the world is going, the way inflation is, the way longevity is going, and how science is working towards making us live longer, you know, even financial planners are questioning whether whatever your planning is, whether that will be enough. We talk about 80 years, or 70 years, or 90 years. So I'm associated, for example, with the Stanford Center on Longevity. So I'm one of their global ambassadors. And one of the things we've been talking about is the century life. Now, in a way, we as ambassadors and Stanford Center on Longevity has pretty much taken it for granted that the 100-year life is here to stay. So when you start working backwards and planning for it, having a retirement age at 58, 60, 65, the bigger question is, what are you going to do for 35 years, 40 years, or 30 years? Um, so our phrase at Wisdom Circle is, we say, while the world is solving for people to live longer, we are solving for what will people do if they live longer. Now that's on the supply side of why this marketplace exists. On the demand side, again, it's very different for based on which market you are in. But imagine having a structured approach to hiring people who want to work post retirement. We're not saying everyone should work. Anyone who wants to work should be able to work.
That's very wise. But you spoke about wanting to work. But the reasons that you gave us, do you think that with humans and looking at extended lifespans, want will end up becoming a need at some point for the majority of people?
Let me answer it differently. So, meaningful engagement is going to be a need, okay? Because you have to be engaged socially, mentally, physically. Of course, everybody talks about, and there are different ways. And that, in a way, from a want to a need has already happened. The moment you put in the financial angle to it, in whichever countries where the pension systems are not supportive enough, it becomes a need, right? But for example, if you look at the Nordic countries or you look at Western Europe, where the pension systems are extremely favorable for people as you get older, there is no need to work, right? But at the same time, the want is there now. But if you look at other countries, if you look at the US, for example, in a lot of the private sector, there is no pension. There is a need to work, because otherwise you will not be able to pay for your healthcare. You will not be able to afford your lifestyle, whichever you have, put together in all these years, and if you want to maintain it. So I think it varies geographically.
Finally, from all that you said, finally it comes down to I better do something about my life after retirement, and I better plan a second career because I don't see anything else coming my way.
No, no, and you're absolutely right. I think for most of us who are above the age of 50 today, it is a problem, because I don't think in our lifetimes, especially if you're over 60 or over 70, don't expect support from the government. Don't expect support from policy. Don't expect support from artificial intelligence. You are on your own, right? Now, if you're in your 40s, it's a whole different ballgame. And we'll talk about that, because I also have some observations on, if I'm younger, what should I do and how should I plan for it?
So now that we've come to a consensus that we'll probably end up working even after 60, how do we go about it? I mean, of course, we can come to you, come to Wisdom Circle, but how is it going to be different from what I'm doing right now?
So
And we can probably later talk about how to go about it.
actually, let me address both of those together in a way, right? So let me tell you what organizations are looking for. Okay. See, if you're a very senior person, right? You've been a CEO, CXO. Typically, those folks don't have much of an issue. One, because they've saved enough money, they've been senior enough. They get onto boards, they get onto becoming advisors for startups and the like, right? So that's not the segment that actually has to. I mean, they worry, but not as much. If you go one, two levels, if you go to our, the hardworking middle class, which most of us fit in, hardworking aspirational middle class who have achieved by working hard, who are educated, and who sort of got into this space. The problem is general management as an idea. So if you're a generalist, you have lesser value for the world than if you are someone who has depth. Having depth is what is going to carry us longer. Now, and the depth may change over time. Comes
Let
back
me let
to
me let me interrupt you there. What is depth? What do you mean when you say depth?
depth. I mean being good at one thing and or two, whatever that subject is or a function is, and just being damn good at it. Right? It's just knowing your space. Now, if you are a journalist, you are a damn good journalist because you've just done it all your life, right? That's depth. But if you're a journalist who's also teaching, but at the same time is fixing motorcycles and doing, then you kind of diluted the depth that you could have got. Not to say that that doesn't work, but now if you are a manager of journalists and this and that and all together, then you're a manager. A manager, you have many more managers than you have depth journalists. So for me, depth is just being good at something and doing your 10,000 hours or doing whatever that number is and getting good at it. Now, that may need to change as the market evolves, right? So yesterday, if you were a programmer, and today when AI has come in and you haven't pivoted, then your depth may not be also relevant. So I think there is a relevance piece as well that you have to think about, of relevance for the world, relevance for the future, etc. So when me and my elder son, we talk about, the other day we were talking about, okay, what are the areas of the world that are not yet explored? So if I now I'm talking about what the 20, 30, 40-year old should be thinking about, right? So what are the areas of the world that is not yet explored? The brain, right? If you think of depth in understanding the brain, it is still ways away from understanding the human body versus the brain. So if you want to get into biology, if you want to get into getting into depth, understand neuroscience, understand cognition, understand the brain much better. If you want to be a geologist versus if you want to be someone who studies the ocean, I would say go study the ocean, because that's not understood as well, right? Similarly, if you are into aerospace versus if you are into what Elon is doing with SpaceX, I'd say go towards SpaceX. So I'm saying pick areas where you can go deeper that will be relevant for the world, where you, no matter whether there is AI or not, at least the overseeing of AI you will do.
So you're saying emerging fields and build expertise in that.
And be open. A friend of mine, and he told me this 10 years ago. So I was asking him, I said, and he's this super smart guy who's now has an AI company, um, and he's got a PhD in computer science. And so I'd asked him about 10 years ago. I said, what advice should we be giving our children about what they should learn? Um, and I think he had a very profound statement, which I understood much later. He says, you got to teach them how to learn. So they have to learn how to learn. That's the what you should be telling your children. So which means unlearning and learning, and that cycle is one of the most important things that will make you last longer in terms of relevance for the world.
So what you're telling me is two or three things over here. One, develop expertise in
You're a
one
damn good
particular
journalist. Now
area.
you're sort of summarizing in a
Yeah.
nice articulate way.
So developing expertise in one area, and then you're telling us that we should be looking at emerging areas which will be of higher interest in the future. And the third, the thing is, we need to learn and unlearn throughout our lives. Okay. So we've established what we need to do. We've established that we need to work. Now let's talk about this future workplace, especially the one after retirement, or after once we choose to slow down, since you don't like the word retirement.
So let me answer this again, as you would see, differently. Right? I get the question. The My thesis on this is, which a lot of people talk about, is what we call the portfolio life. Now, there is a requirement to this, which is you have to be financially secure. If you're not financially secure, then you're all 5 days of the 7-day week is a work week, right? So financial security is at the base before you get to this ideal state. Again, ideal state, 2 days of the week, you're working to make a living. 1 day of the week, you're teaching. Now, why is that important? Because a lot of us have learned so many things over. Now, we may not feel we are good teachers. That's a different problem, right? But eventually, a lot of us want to share what we know. So I use the generic word teaching, but call it sharing, call it mentoring, call it whatever, right? There's a 1 day a week where I want to give back by teaching, but it has an other element to it, which is intergenerational connectivity. Now, intergenerational connectivity as we get older is extremely important. Old people do not want to hang out with other old people. Not that they should, there is a community element to it, but the happiness comes when you're sharing and working with younger people. So that's your 1 day a week, right? Which is, you got 2 + 1, 3 days. The fourth day is working with a social organization or social impact organization, where you're giving your time, you're doing stuff for the needy. It's different from teaching, it's different from working, but then it's in simple words, in the Indian context, is working for a non-profit or giving your time to a non-profit or volunteering for it. Now, of these four, the first 2 days actually pays you, the third could pay you, the third day, fourth day is unlikely to pay you, right? That's your 4 days. Of the balance 3 days, it has to be a mix of caring for yourself, it has to be learning, and it has to be, you know, travel and time with family. So this is the ideal. Now, what we have seen is immediately after retirement, you may come back and say, look, I'm not going to start working. I don't need as much time. So you may want to go for, some people will completely go, all 7 days are travel and for me, right? That's typically what is it the world expects. Some will say, you know what, it's not happening for me. I'm actually going to work 4 days a week. And then I get 3 days of doing everything else. And that 4 days then gradually becomes 3 days and gradually becomes 2 days. Now, that model of how you operate is up to you.
Let's
Hmm.
get down to the brass tacks now. If I want to, like I promised the audience at the beginning, I want to give them action points. we've understood that the landscape would be something where we are working 2 days a week. We are working on our own time, at the times that we are comfortable working, right? And but how does the what kind of roles are being offered for this kind of work week that you talk of?
So for me, again, see, this is now related to the depth piece. What we are observing is if you are skilled in a particular industry, a function, um, you actually have a much higher chance of being um, relevant for organizations after you sort of step away from the career journey. So, say you're damn good in supply chain, you're damn good in logistics, or marketing, or branding, or finance. Um, so, do not lose the depth that you have built over time, because that's the stuff that is monetizable. So organizations typically will come to us now, and it again varies, right? We are also starting to see interim management roles, right? So when organizations are in transition, etc., so they'll get their CEO, CXO, head of finance, head of marketing to come in for a short duration, help them through a transition, and move out. So, for example, if a startup product has come up with a startup company has come up with a product that can be utilized in different industries where they don't understand the industry, or they don't understand the geography, or they don't understand, a depth in a particular subject. Again, that's when they will come to this segment for. If you look at MSMEs, which is, by the way, for India, is such a huge segment, right? And you got like lakhs of companies in that bracket. This is an immense opportunity for those organizations, and they come to us for, because they can't afford people full time, right? Say you wanted someone to help them with treasury, or someone who to help them with HR. No, they can't afford retired HR people full time from multinational organizations that they aspire to be like. So what they'll be like, look, give us 1 day a week, and they'll pay their equivalent 1 day a week. But the wisdom that they get from that 1 day a week, which they can translate and execute with the younger people that they have in the team or the less experienced people, that model works. And literally, you can break it down, right? So MSMEs just love this talent pool because for them, they can tap into any expertise. One company was saying, help me find a metallurgist that can talk to my metallurgist 1 hour every day. I need a global metallurgist that does that. One company came to us saying, look, help us find someone who has worked in financial planning because we are having this particular issue along the planning exercise that we do, and help us figure it out. One company came to us and said, look, help us find um, someone who has done innovation and built up innovation labs, to help us figure out how we should improve innovation because we just don't know. We do it our way, but to get somebody who's that experienced, we can't afford. If somebody gives us even 1 day a week, that's more than enough for us. So that's the MSME. Then you have the large organizations. In large organizations, it's typically capacity, right? A huge project has come, they need people, they just don't know where to go. Right? They typically will go to a KPMG or a EY or a Deloitte and get consultants. So in those cases, you're actually replacing consultants, where they're saying, look, this is a much cheaper way. I can get people to do project management. I can get people with X or Y experience. We had one organization that reached out to us saying, look, we're building stores across the country. Can you help us find somebody who's done this and is retired so who can come and spend a year with us and train our people on how do expand quickly? Um, so we had one company that came to us and said, "Look, help us find somebody um, who understands supercritical boilers and is retired from BHEL because we just don't know." And BHEL people have done this all their life. We want to get into the business. We don't understand. One company came to us and said, "Look, help us find a retired forest service officer from Telangana." So that a telecom company can lay fiber in the forest because the forest service officers will understand. So a lot of people are not driven by money to work. Although if you do not pay them, they will then deprioritize this. So our view is you have to pay people, right? Whether it's a social impact organization. By the way, social impact organizations also hire a lot from us. One university came to us and said, "Look, we teach 29 courses. Can you find us a guest lecturer for every class we teach?" I think the use cases, we are also surprised by the kind of use cases that are coming out on our platform. To come back to what kind of jobs there are, we don't know. And as the world changes, we'll also adapt.
So now tell me this. Say I'm in, well, people who are watching this, or for people like us, we are in 30s, 40s, 50s. How how and when do you really start preparing for these kind of jobs? I mean, obviously these things are not going to fall in your lap. You need to do some work to get there, right?
You know, honestly, I think you should always be preparing. And what I mean by that is, to build depth and expertise, it will not happen overnight. Um, so literally, I think in your 30s, you should be clearer. Yeah, look, this is what I want to get good at. 20s is possibly too early, but late 30s is a good time to start thinking about it. And that's today. Right? AI may change the whole ball game of what age means and all of that. Because then it's learn and learn again, right? So this learn unlearn, you have to start as, I mean, you the moment you get into school, forget this, or at least college, that learn unlearn cycle has to work, right? So if you find something interesting, go learn it. If you really like it, go deeper, right? So you got to start early. And I think it will change as generations come by, because, like I said, right, the first principle of having a good life post 60 is financial stability. And if you don't have financial stability, everything goes bonkers.
So one is, of course, one big box is investing and ensuring that you're financially secure.
Correct.
But apart from that, and say we should, of course, start that in our late 20s, early 30s. Apart from that, what else should we be doing? You did mention generating depth in one field.
I think so. Couple of things, right? One, start engaging in social work sooner than you would. Uh, because one, it actually just grounds you on a couple of things. One is it gets you ready for this social work piece that will come later, that you should be involved in, which will give you happiness. But it also tempers your expectations of how we spend money, right? So I know you don't talk about it, if your organizations give you that opportunity to volunteer, to do it, you will actually be better off than you realize about your own needs and wants, and therefore also the side of giving. Because it's not just about how much money you have, and therefore it's also about how much you spend, and it's also about what you spend on. So that's one part of preparation. There are honestly nothing more than just saying you have the right mindset. Because do not, this word retirement should not exist in your directive, right? Just get rid of it. There is nothing called retirement, right? Take time off if you need to. So think of this as a journey that you will be on till the day you die. And if you die at 90 or 100, you'll still be on the journey. You'll just maybe moving slower. So you have to pace it that way. Now, if you have to pace it that way, you have to think that way, saying, okay, what can I do that will last that long? Therefore, teaching is if you ask anyone whose parents, grandparents have lived in their 90s or to 100, ask them what they did. Very rarely will you find somebody that said, yeah, I retired at 58 or 60 and I lived till a good life till 90 or 95. They are always meaningfully engaged on something. They're helping their church, they're helping their temple, they're helping their mosque. So that's one part. You need to be out there doing stuff, right? There are people who be like, I'm a teacher, I continue teaching. There are people working on, I have my own consulting. At the end, what does it mean? It means I am doing something. And by the way, again, which is the segment that lives the longest? Do you know? Did I ask you that earlier?
No,
Politicians,
politicians.
right? Why? Because they get active at 60, 70, 80, right? The brain works. I mean, just think about it, right? Lawyers, doctors never retire, most of them at least, right? Politicians. And most of them, in spite of deteriorating physical health, they stay sharp till the end.
But then what about, I mean, there's also this thought of people that, when I retire, I would want to do something else. Uh,
Karo,
so
so,
how do you prepare for it? How do you go about it?
you can't
I mean,
prepare for it.
apart from,
Kya prepare karoge? I think like you have to do. So, this whole notion, Kavita, that I will do everything. So, my view is this whole notion ki retirement ki baat karo. Retirement, why do you have to wait that long, no? You start doing it slowly, slowly, slowly. अरे मैं रिटायरमेंट के बाद गोल्फ खेलूंगा, अरे रिटायरमेंट के बाद स्विंग ही नहीं होगी, वो कमर लचक जाएगी, right? So you have to start learning before. It's like saying, यार, oh, मैं retirement के बाद ना, I will, become the best archer in the world. Yes, you can. You have to give it time, but you got to start early. So I think whatever you want to do when you retire, start doing it now, whatever age you're at. Even if it is like 1 day a month or 1 hour a month, do it, right? So that's getting ready for, so which again has a bigger thing is hobbies, right? Most Indian middle class, at least men, do not have hobbies. And that comes to bite them when they retire because they don't know what to do. So have hobbies.
Some of these hobbies can also turn into
a profession.
Career option.
Yeah. So for example, right? There are people I know who've gone out. There's a friend or someone I met in California who post retirement from a tech company started teaching about the Indian epics at a local state university in California. That was his hobby, right? He read history, he kind of understood, he could then start making connections. So in that case, it was a hobby that became a profession. So honestly, you're absolutely right? I mean, and that's your, I will do something different. So this question of what is it, like, for example, somebody says, I would love to be a scuba diver after I retire. Hey, start scuba diving now. So by the time you retire, you can then start teaching scuba diving.
Compensation. I mean, at the end of the day, people are working for money. What kind of compensation can you expect if you're working 2 days a week or 4 hours a day or things like that?
I think that the best way to look at it is prorating your last round compensation into the time you're giving and discounting it a bit. Not increasing it, discounting it a bit. I think that's the way to think about it, right? So if on an average, and I'm just making up a number, say you're making 20,000 rupees a day, right? So if you work for half a day, that makes it 10,000. If you give it a discount, you can say 8,000, right? I'm just giving you a sense of how typically, see, because normally people post-retirement are not driven by money. And by the time you get to that senior post before you retire, and if you take out the general management piece and only your core skills, the market doesn't value it as much unless you are really an expert. Like if you're a retired ISRO guy and a private space organization wants to hire you, you will actually get paid way more than what you were getting paid at ISRO.
Right.
So from a government to a private, expect more. From a private to a consulting gig, put a discount to what your pro rata rate would be from your last round salary.
What are the other benefits that you get from this?
Nothing.
Like you did mention some of those. You did talk about being socially and mentally active.
Correct, I just put it. Yeah, look, I think the biggest benefit you get is that you find yourself relevant. Right? When someone gives you a job, asks you to do something and pays you for it, it's a self-respect thing. Yeah, someone values what I do or what I know. Believe it or not, as you get older, that's what matters. And someone who can do that and they can earn money through it, that's the perfect model.
I know that's a great note to end this conversation on. And like I promised you, Neeraj will make you rethink retirement. And I hope that he has done so. As he just pointed out, we will need to work after our 60s, after we choose to slow down as well. And that is because we are living longer. We need money to live longer. And more importantly, we need to stay engaged. We need to stay mentally and socially engaged. And like Neeraj pointed out, working will continue keeping us relevant. And that is the reason we will need to continue to work. So that's it from the longevity short this time. But do join us because these conversations on building and planning for that 100-year life will continue over here on Never Too Late. See you around.